A history and a quest. Now is the time for all good men and women to come to the aid of their country. In high school, that was the first thing we had to learn in typing class. Every one of us was expected to learn a trade, to be skilled enough to do a job in an office, to be prepared for life. But we were barely taught our number one job, civics, how to be a citizen. It was just a given. Nothing to worry about. We live in a democracy. Good. So? I had no idea that sentence was written in 1776 at Valley Forge, in freezing cold, on a drumhead with only a candle for light. It was in a long screed called American Crisis. It was finished that night, and the writer showed it to Washington, and then got a horse, rode to Philadelphia at his peril through a country filled with Tories and British soldiers, and printed it on a hand press. It was a paper full of treason to the British Crown. A paper like this one I've written, with no gun to force anyone to read it, just a paper with words. But in 1776, the words were a call to action, an invitation to danger, torture, even hanging. Today, in 2025, the penalty for not fighting the enemies of democracy is the dispossession and death of our democracy, and even the dream of America itself. 1776. Washington, the new leader of an unthinkable and maybe a doomed revolution, was to that day a failure. He had done little but retreat with whatever army he had at the moment, to run from the enemy, from the overwhelming might of the British Crown, from Brooklyn to Manhattan, from Manhattan to New Jersey, and now to the frigid banks of the Delaware River. He was desperate. His men had little food, no shoes, no warmth, facing a river filled with rushing ice floes. Nevertheless, in the dark of dawn, he would take his ill-clothed, hungry, freezing, tiny band of patriots across that river and attack a garrison full of brutal Hessian conscripts who had been bought by the British to help them terrorize these untrained, hapless revolutionists. It was Christmas Eve. It was Last Chance Charlie. These volunteers, what was left of them after desertions, were farmers, blacksmiths, shoemakers, food purveyors, mom-and-pop operators of tiny businesses. Workers, poor folks all, but with pride in what they had built, and a hunger for something as yet undefined. There were also freedmen, ex-slaves, and free New England boatmen. These few were all he had to fight a war to run the British Army out of this place called America. And they all knew what the stakes were, these ordinary Americans, and they had everything to lose if they failed, their livelihoods, their homes, and their lives. They could be tortured, tried, and murdered. Why on earth did they offer themselves in sacrifice? After long subservience, a few far-sighted Americans had risen, determined to cast out a king, a half-mad, tyrannical despot who cared nothing of the suffering of his subjects. Subjects, not persons. And who was pampered by wealth and sycophantic courtiers who bent to their knees in his presence and who obeyed his every whim. The odds were heavy against the rebels, with a noose waiting in the gallows. Their leader was known to be honest, and he had some military skill, but he was a patrician landowner with a lot to lose. Could he stick it out? Could they count on him to beat back the greatest army on earth? Why were these men willing to stand up against such a power? Did they dream that a better, finer way to live was possible in this America? Named, weirdly, after an Italian sea captain who in 1499 sailed into a bay, looked around, and sailed on to coasts to the south. He couldn't see the ghostly essence of a statue, representing liberty, lifting her lamp beside the golden door. Nor did he know that thousands upon thousands of his countrymen would be immigrants to this land in a few centuries, and that this land would become salvation for the poor, the homeless, and for those yearning to breathe free. Freedom was the key to a real life, a life fit for a human being. A life not limited or crushed by a dictator who claimed he was tasked by God itself to rule, to mess with each life he dominated, while luxuriating in his wealth and power, gathering to himself those who would accept the ancient and mephitic lie that kingly power was real and good and God-blessed and given to a special human. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And a few good men were determined to find a better way to live. Lexington Green, First Blood. Captain John Parker, an ordinary farmer, was alerted that his small group of Minutemen were needed to show resistance to the approaching army. He walked out onto the green on a fine, dewy April morning, accompanied by boys and men of his town. They heard the drums and fifes, and then watched as an entire regiment of British regulars, bayonets fixed, marched up to and stopped on the other side of a small bridge over a brook. He could see the ages of the front ranks. Boys, barely ready to shave and scared enough to shit their pants. But they had trained for this potential slaughter, and they were not going to go back to an English prison to die. Better to die here. Parker told his men not to fire. He said, "Stand your ground, but if they mean to have a war, let it begin here. Wait. Maybe the British commander would back off in the face of their free force." But then a shot was fired. From where? A Minuteman fell to the grass, his musket unfired. The man down, Prince Estabrook, a black man, well liked in the town, died, his blood turning the green grass red. Now the British, believing an American had fired the shot, went into their routine. Front rank kneel, firing position, second rank prepare to fire. Fire! Minutemen fell. Parker told his men to fire back, and young English boys fell, gurgling blood from pierced hearts. The American Revolution was on. American reinforcements emerged from the woods surrounding the Brits and began shooting from cover. It was a bloody rout. The British dragged their dead, put them into wagons, and withdrew. Thus began 8 horrific years of brutal war for our right to live free, to make our own government. For us, we the people of 2025, it may be hard to imagine this scene, this long-ago war, the men and women who were murdered by a dictator for the right to govern themselves. But they were thinking of us, thinking of a future for their families and of our sons and daughters who would accept this freedom, this peace in their homes. They died for us. Now we, in 2025, are face-to-face with the same situation. How are we handling it? I see apathy. I see cooperation with the monsters who are right now ripping down every shred of this country that we have counted on. We know many Americans who have fallen in such scenes, and the incredible bravery at Lexington and Concord that April day. How dare we forget the heroism that has made this country what it is? Can we, casually like a candy wrapper, throw away a nation that has given each of us so much in the cause of liberty? How dare we sleep through the destruction of a country which has saved the world more than once? A country seriously flawed, yes, but generous as a kind father. A country that has been arrogant and made stupid wars and has neglected its own moral beauty and hurt its people by that neglect. Yes, all that. But this is now our problem, our challenge. If we fail to kick these monsters out, we will be shamed eternally. Me and you. The United States of America is not a hoax, even though we are under the heel of the worst hoax that ever claimed to be human. A few good men saw a different landscape. America showed them riches of a different kind, the beauty of immense space, a fecund land, an endless wilderness in which every American would have room to live and grow. It must have seemed a God-given chance to be free, to make a place for equality for all, a life to share as it was shared, a life absolutely free of a ruler who taxed them irrationally and ruled despotically. The promise of a new nation ruled by them. This made them feel exceptional. This glimmer of hope would require from these few that they invent a society based not on royal entitlement and privilege, but on law, where each person, bolstered by honest laws, could be a king. That is, to have a crucial and historical task to take on, to build a new country. These were educated men who had studied the texts of Greek and Roman leaders and philosophers, who had created a way to govern their small countries with a political innovation called democracy, after the Greek word demos, the people, and kratos, power. The new leaders assumed that they, with their knowledge of history, were the only ones suited to construct and lead a democracy in America. They assumed that everyone would be content to follow their lead in making a new government. This was a fundamental mistake. They didn't understand that the system they founded would create something new, the people. And the people believed that the country was as much theirs as it was their leaders. America and democracy were one and the same, united, melded, indivisible. America could not leave anybody out of the equation. The leaders' belief that wealthy, educated white men were the inevitable guides to this new way of organizing society was hubris, a tragic oversight that forgot a vital part of humanity that had a key role in the democratic experiment, the people, who had already built colonial America from the ground up and could not be benignly excluded from actual governing by a perceived lack of education or a roughness that their betters deemed unacceptable. Other groups of the people were excluded for pernicious reasons. Native Americans were savages, who, by the way, had already created their own democracies by organizing on a basic sense of the equality of each and by picking chiefs and leaders by common consent. Women chiefs were not rare. Black slaves were brutally excluded as being 3/5 of a human, according to the constitutional compromise made to keep Southern legislators from breaking the hoped-for unity. But the worst of it was that the white leaders also accepted the view that black slaves were permanently blocked from white society by being black and a slave. Thus, they fell under the exclusion law. That senseless loophole was a noose. Slavery in the Bible was given by God. So, disunity pretended to be unity. The lawmakers of that day opened a door for racism to eat its way into our laws and our lives. This mistake and the long-ago abandonment of educating the people to their all-important role of governing has brought us to this moment of reckoning. This pretense is the story of our people from then to now. The lies we've told ourselves have reached through the years and have finally produced a golem, a monster far more dangerous than George III. And now he has helpers, ignorant racists. After decades of fighting racist attempts to lead the people into mind slavery, fully half of Americans have given up the pretense. They are told by their leaders to hate blacks, Jews, Muslims, LGBTQ plus folk, anyone the leader hates. The golem, by the force of lies, is determined to eliminate freedom and replace it with the worst of all forms of existence, a darkness at noon called totalitarianism, wherein your every thought and action will be monitored, and you will be swiftly punished until you are broken. Do you want that? It's coming. We knew once that we were the leaders, the bosses of America. But at this crucial moment, we seem to have forgotten. It can't happen here. But it has. It has, and it's close to the point where we will be so chained up and neutered that we can't ever get free except by death. This is here now, and it is here today, and tomorrow will be too late for buyer's remorse. What can we do? What did they do? The man writing in the icy dark on a drumhead was Thomas Paine. As a boy in England, he got a trade with his father making corsets, but left for a job collecting taxes for the crown on liquor and tobacco. But he wanted something better, something higher, something finer. So he used his paltry pay to buy books and scientific apparatus. And he wrote an article suggesting that higher pay would stop the corruption, the bribery in the tax service. And he was fired. The Crown could not tolerate any criticism. He met Ben Franklin, who advised him to go to America. And there, he joined the men who had committed their lives to separation from British rule. And now he was with Washington at Valley Forge that freezing night, scribbling as fast as his quill and pot of ink allowed, words. Words meant to arouse Americans to throw off the tyranny that was hurting everyone. This bit of paper with writing on it was the spark that created a new nation. This paper was bought for tuppence, and Tom Paine gathered the accumulated pennies and donated them to the cause of liberty. Every penny counted. Today, we see fortunes tossed in the ring by corporations, oligarchs in training, who want to see a dictatorship destroy America. We, the people, will become subjects again, this time to the oligarchs. Paine's paper was a guide to how democracy serves the people and why dictatorship kills them. And he called this one common sense. And it was. It was reasonable treason, civil, literate, unafraid, and direct. It immediately asked, why does a country need a king? It went right to the heart of how a people thought a dictator would make them safe and prosperous. Citizens like you and me, who hoped for a government that would give safety and fairness and a simple economy that let us live and raise children and believe in any God we chose. We now have a hard choice. Rebel and be free, or surrender to the golem and his poisonous comrades and die as slaves. In 1776, we had the guts to save ourselves. Do we now? There were 2.5 million Americans then. The broadside was distributed to any who could read. The message went viral. It sold to 100,000 people. Not many by today's extravagant reckoning, but enough. Think of it. Think if this nonviolent message that you were reading, if that number answered this call to arms and stuck with it, we could overthrow this creepy, criminal, crazy man now sleeping in the People's White House. He calls all elections he loses rigged. I call his election and his fake assassination attempt rigged. Prove it's not. We the people are the heirs of 250 years of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. If we go back to sleep and let this nation, this government, slip through our hands, we will never have another chance to live free. Look at North Korea, Russia, China, Hungary, others around the world who have slept and waked up to slavery to one man. It's too late for them, and the door is closing on our one chance to escape living the rest of our lives as zombies. If we wake up now and drag this monster from his throne, we will have taken the first step toward a more perfect union. Lincoln named our democracy the last best hope of earth. Think. Think what we are throwing away right now if we don't fight. Lincoln knew the people, and he fought like an angel to make democracy real. He knew how much work had to be done. It is our sacred duty to fight like angels for our chance. We must remake our Constitution. We must remake the social contract between the people and the government. We must rewrite the Second Amendment back to its original meaning. We must remake the law that says no man is above the law. We must fix the Supreme Court that the GOP has corrupted. We must remove every member of Congress who has been corrupted by this saboteur, this mistake of a president. We must teach every American the meaning and application of a democracy and its dependence on we, the people, to make it work. We must stop any bill that turns elections into auctions. Why can we not have the America that we, the people, want? We can, if we summon the guts of a Minuteman to face what the lunatic loser will throw at us and take back our self-respect. We must wake the country up. There are ways. Common sense and American crisis burst upon the royally shanghaied citizen slaves with a force that surprised the people and heartened them to fight for their very lives. They knew what they were up against. The royal yoke on their necks was accepted as a 1,000-year-old sacred writ. Only heresy could break it, and heresy was unthinkable. This was disobeying God. They took that on. The fight was long and bloody and terrifyingly uncertain. The king demanded victory. Our leaders ran from town to country and back to hide from the British soldiers ready to hang the lot of them when caught. They stuck with it, and they kept the Continental Congress together and raised money for the improbable fight as they could. A large portion came from a Jewish immigrant, and they survived. Ordinary folks, like you and me, performed shockingly brave deeds. The leader gradually gained strategic and tactical experience, and he and his allies in the Congress swore the sacrifice of their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. Their honor. What a concept. What a blessed idea. The gallantry to do the right thing all the time. Where do we find that today? In a few individuals, like Senator Cory Booker.
When our founder said we must mutually pledge to each other, our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We need that now from all Americans. This is a moral moment. It's not left or right, it's right or wrong. Let's get in good trouble.
We spoke for more than 25 hours in Congress to arouse us to our obligation to be Americans. And there are others. But there is a numbing general grievance and apathy in America today, and it is made by the very belief that government will always be our piggy bank. So just lay back in the lazy boy, pop a brew, wiggle your toes, and sleep through life in the through zone. This revolution cannot be about the price of eggs or gasoline or whether inflation is up or down or the stock market. It cannot be about grievance and monstrous greed. This fight will determine more than the quality of life. It is, literally, if we humans will continue to occupy this planet, which is rapidly succumbing to heat and crazy weather events and getting worse by the day. The leaders we have inherited are not concerned about this. Like Midas, who was so in love with his gold, he didn't see his daughter turning into a dead bar of it, to the golems now in possession of us. To them, we the people are all Midas's daughter. Nothing compared to gold. They intend to get control of every fountain of money and power in existence. If we ride this tiger in hopes it won't eat us, the tiger will eat us, and then we'll be eaten by something bigger, the cannibalism that infects every dictatorship. Democracy cannot work without common sense citizen input. Elections demand full participation. We can no longer skim over drug use, homelessness, our disregard for veterans, ubiquitous racism, anti-Semitism, massive corruption by office holders, and some of us too, and simply be content with our soda pop and television, shopping, raves, sports, and excesses of every kind, and elect masses of office holders who are incompetent, incoherent, ignorant, and venal. There are a few honest congresspersons who struggle with constant compromise and stultification. Our formerly esteemed Congress now seems like a third-grade class with no teacher present. No wonder we have a public that can't identify anyone in office, including presidents, what they do, or how government works. This is our fault. We, the people, have failed in our one mission, to keep our folks safe. Is our democracy now a revolution, which is the impossible dream? America won that revolution, and for 250 years, we have been a beacon of freedom for the entire world, a lighthouse above the shoals and reefs of monarchy and autocracy. We accepted immigrants from every country on earth, We were a cornucopia of generosity for those countries and people who have needed our help. We gave freely of our treasury and our protection and our civilization. We inspired the world. But things have changed. Globalism demands that we connect our way of life to many which live counter to our way. Democracy must now compete with new iterations of autocracy. Okay, here's the opposite as I see it. The fighter we call the Democrat is losing in the first round of the fight. He's flat on his back on the canvas from a sucker punch by his opponent, the Golem, who is assuming that it's all over and taking a victory lap around the ring. He's a cheater. He smeared ointment in our eyes and punched us in the kidneys and cojones. And he has bribed the ref with the big bucks. Some in the audience see the cheat, the bribe, and are screaming, "Get up! Get up!" Will we? Can we shake off the fog and the cheating and the bribe taken by the ref, whose judgment is supposed to be supreme, but who we know is in the pocket? Is it possible to beat the odds, put this sucker down, and reclaim our title? Can we punch out the bigotry, ignorance, poverty, inequality, which has stealthily, unfairly confused us in the 21st century? Can we absorb the unfair blows in this rigged fight and still stay on our feet long enough to come out of this with a TKO? Not enough. This is the fight of the century. We need a knockout. And half the crowd is betting we lose big. We are at the edge of anarchy without the smarts to identify it. We have allowed money and corporate greed to turn elections into rigged games won by the highest bidder. Tribal fights and grievance have become the tenor of the times. We have abandoned democracy because we are ignorant of its power. We are a nation of haves and have-nots, and the have-nots' voices, unheard for too long, have now become the drowning sound of Edvard Munch's The Scream. Can we come from behind in the last round? This is a battle to the death against cruel, crooked, morals-free fighters who, by their criminal tactics, have the advantage of us before we've even gotten out of bed. We have a migraine of forgetfulness. We're in a state of apathy, believing that we are exceptional without a shred of proof. We have forgotten our own goodness. Capitalism has run amok, and the suffering of the forgotten and neglected in our country has divided us into factions. Caught in the money flow which has corrupted everything, our political parties have abandoned their jobs. Has our self-flattery, our greed, envy, wrath, lust, gluttony, and sloth doomed us 7 times over? This is the American crisis. Can common sense save us? Kingship is a degradation, a lessening of ourselves. It's not in the power of a king to conquer America if she does not conquer herself by delay and timidity and by unmanly and fatal slumber. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, and yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. Heaven knows how to put a proper price on its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. Thomas Paine, 1776. Our negligence has put our backs to the wall, So, what do we do now? There is precedent. When bad men combine, the good must associate, else they will fall, one by one, an unpitied sacrifice in a contemptible struggle. Edmund Burke. Our lifeline is set out in The Politics of Nonviolent Action by author Gene Sharp. And what I've read has given me purpose and hope. Gene Sharp describes The Politics of Nonviolent Action as a major exploration of the nature of nonviolent struggle. This edition is in 3 volumes: Power and Struggle, The Methods of Nonviolent Action, and The Dynamics of Nonviolent Action. Power and Struggle begins with an examination of political power. It is often assumed that power derives from violence and can be controlled only by greater violence. Actually, power derives from sources in society which may be restricted or severed by withdrawal of cooperation by the populace. The power of governments may, in fact, be very fragile. Even the power of dictators may be destroyed by the withdrawal of the human assistance which made the regime possible. Nonviolence is based on that insight. Using nonviolent action, people have won higher wages, broken social barriers, changed government policies, frustrated invaders, paralyzed an empire, and dissolved dictatorships. The Methods of Nonviolent Action examines in detail 198 specific methods of this technique, broadly classed as nonviolent protest and persuasion, non-cooperation, social, economic, and political, and nonviolent intervention. And each of these specific nonviolent weapons is illustrated with actual cases. There are 14 chapters in Gene Sharp's works explaining specific ways to put would-be dictators on the back foot and actually stop a takeover or render it helpless. It has been Gene Sharp's lifetime task to defend against Edmund Burke's bad men. It is the way that we, the people, must quickly and thoroughly learn and immediately get our game on.
Fight for your lives before it's someone else's job.
Our opponents in this war hungered not only for the freedom to do what they want on land, sea, and air, but even on Mars if they get there. We know this, and yet we are holding back and we're obeying in advance. A famous, powerful law firm, Paul Weiss, just gave up resistance without a peep. Smart lawyers who know how to fight this stuff lay down like beaten dogs before their masters even hit them with a cattle prod. We are, likewise, giving our country and our families' lives away. We know this, and every day and every night we fret over it. It's late, and our oppressors are moving with overwhelming speed and organization to smother us in the dictates of Project 2025. This little paper here asks us to follow Gene Sharp's map and do something. To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to fight for the right without question or pause, to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause. Joe Darian, Mitch Lee. I ask all of you to saddle up and join me in organizing whatever size group we can gather to make a simple plan and confront these ruthless thieves stealing our livelihoods, trashing our country's reputation, denying our children's futures, and, God help us, destroying our planet on the altar of greed When I was 7, Pearl Harbor was attacked. Our little Arkansas neighborhood came together to mourn and then to fight for our country. Soon, every other house in town had a gold star in the window, but we fought on. 400,000 Americans died fighting European and Asian enemies, dictators. The war ended. My uncles survived Omaha Beach and came home safe. Americans hugged each other and cried and thanked God and got back to work to rebuild our country. But we also rebuilt our enemies' countries and all of Europe. As a kid, I knew I belonged to the most blessed country on earth, and so did every American alive. And I remember that America, and I want it back. I'm an actor, not a pundit, and not a guru with a cadre of followers. I'm just a guy who learned a craft to please and enlighten an audience of the heights and depths of human endeavor. I have longed for a better, finer, higher life than I could even conceive. And now I see that my country, for all its foobarrs and frustrating messes, has given birth to idealists and fighters for social justice, great men and women who have kept me standing on my feet. Good people who have helped me try to make things better for my family and for those I have touched on the other side of a stage or camera. My country needs me. I cannot say no. Please, please help, if you have it in you. Apparently, this is our last chance.